Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. There we go. Good to see some familiar faces. We'll just give people a few, like 3 minutes to come on in. Hi, everyone. Just wait another minute or two in case we have a few stragglers, and then we'll get started. Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Olivia, if you could just keep an eye on the waiting room for me. Thank you. Um, Alrighty, can everyone see my screen before I get started? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for the second community meeting for Edgartown's Housing Production Plan. My name is Laurel Meir, and I'm a community planner at Barrett Planning Group. And I'm also joined by my colleagues, Alexis Lanzalata and Olivia James. And so this is the second of 3 community meetings for this plan, and we'll be discussing goals and strategies for creating and preserving affordable housing. But to begin, we will review what a housing production plan is, prior work done for Martha's Vineyard and the town, and then provide a brief summary of the first community meeting we held in April. We'll then have a group activities to solicit feedback about drafted housing goals, as well as brainstorm strategies that can help reach those goals. So I just ask that you hold your questions until the group activity. We'll have some time then. So we covered this at length during the first community meeting, but in case there are new faces here, I will go over what an HBP is briefly, just so we're all familiar. However, if you missed that first community meeting and want more information, a recording is posted on the project page, which we can drop a link in the chat either now or later, if that's available. Okay. So first off, a housing production plan is one of the state's tools to help communities reach the goal of achieving 10% minimum affordable year-round housing. So you'll hear me mention this 10% goal throughout tonight in this process, and essentially the state has a goal for every community to have 10% of their year-round housing stock be deed restricted to affordable year-round housing. So through the process of developing an HPP, a community can better understand what kind of homes are needed, what barriers are keeping the town from meeting those needs, and set goals to increase the diversity of housing options. HPPs have a 5-year lifespan designed to help communities meet those goals and work towards the 10%, while also guiding development to match your town's values and policies. So the housing production plan document itself is pretty standardized and based on 3 specific elements. The first is a housing needs assessment, then specific affordable housing goals, and the last element are implementation strategies. So for the housing needs assessment portion of the plan, the town will report information about what can affect housing needs, things like demographics, what housing is currently available or in the pipeline, an analysis of land use regulations and zoning, and ultimately this section will identify what constrains creating more diverse and affordable housing options in your town. Second, the affordable housing goals section requires specific numerical goals for annual housing production. It also includes more qualitative goals, such as encouraging a variety of housing types and providing affordable housing to people with low or moderate incomes. So these goals are focused on creating affordable housing for households earning 80% of the area median income, or AMI, or less. So in Dukes County, 80% AMI for a family of two would be a household earning $83,400. And for a family of four, it would be a household earning $104,200. So I want to note that an HPP can also set goals for local needs, and those needs in Martha's Vineyard are higher than that 80, and a lot of the needs in Martha's Vineyard are higher than that 80% AMI level. So the information presented here does focus on the 80% AMI level because that income level must be directly addressed for an HPP to meet state requirements. However, higher income levels will be included in the plan, and please feel free to bring them up in our activity today and strategize to meet those higher need levels. And then the final element of an HPP is implementation strategies. There are 5 strategies outlined in an HPP as required by the state, which are designed to help communities work towards the 10% goal. So you'll need to think about what changes in zoning you are willing to make to allow housing growth and more diverse housing options, identify what areas in the town are a comprehensive permit would be encouraged, meaning what parts of Edgartown you might want to see development in. In addition, what municipally owned land can be used for affordable housing and ways to work regionally to meet housing needs. There are 3 key documents that have already been developed that are helping to inform this HPP. The first is a housing needs assessment conducted by the Martha's Vineyard Commission for the whole island. This is a generalized report that provides an overview of housing needs for Martha's Vineyard, and it identified a disparity in year-round versus seasonal housing, a loss of naturally occurring affordable year-round units, and the contributing factor of a growing population in all 6 towns on housing needs. Moving along, the second key document is an island-wide zoning analysis our firm, Barrett Planning Group, completed for the Martha's Vineyard Commission in 2024. And this report provides a review of each town's zoning bylaws and identifies limits created by the bylaws on housing production. For Edgartown, the analysis recommends providing clear definitions for affordable housing and related terms, revising the existing multifamily and employee housing bylaws, and removing barriers within the special permit process for affordable 1- and 2-family dwellings, among other zoning edits. And the third document is the town's previous draft HPP, which was developed in 2018. Although it was not adopted by the town, this draft HPP identified the need for more year-round rental housing at or below 50% AMI and more diverse housing options, such as multifamily housing and housing for seasonal employees. So this might be familiar to some of you. This is a table that shows all 6 towns' current subsidized housing inventory, or SHI. And so the SHI is how the state and towns keep track of the number of deed-restricted 80% or lower AMI affordable housing units that have met the requirements to be counted towards the 10% goal. So as you can see, Edgartown currently has 109 units on the SHI, representing 4.47 of year-round housing units. To the right, you can see the 1- and 2-year goals, which are yearly step stools you can use to gradually make progress towards the larger 10% goal. So if a community achieves these yearly goals, they can request what's called safe harbor from the state, meaning they temporarily have more control over developers coming before boards seeking permits. So for Edgartown, if 12 affordable housing units are created in 1 year, and you receive safe harbor, the town then has more discretion over what projects you approve and under what condition for that year. After that 1 year, the town would no longer be covered by safe harbor unless you hit the 1- or 2-year HPP target again, or alternatively reach the 10% minimum. And this table shows that most of Edgartown's 109 SHI units are two bedrooms, and these units are mostly just income restricted, not additionally age or disability restricted, which they could also be. Um, so this includes 60 rental units at Morgan Woods, two ownership units at High and Peace Point Way, three ownership units in Fairway Village, and 36 rentals at Mashakit Commons are counted. The Department of Developmental Services also has rental units listed on your SAC. Okay, so that ends the information about HPPs, and we can have some time for questions about what you just heard, keeping in mind that we will have a much more in-depth discussion about goals and strategies after this. But just want to open it up for initial questions, and I will stop sharing so we can all look at each other. And feel free to raise your hand or jump in.
I had a question about if we fund units in other towns. So if we use CPC money to fund affordable housing units in other towns, do those count towards our numbers?
Would be the first time we don't have questions.
Julia, I believe to answer your question,
Yeah.
those funds, if your town contributed to a product in another town, would not count on your SHI. The units only count on the SHI in the community in which they are located. However, there has been some kind of there's some past practice of regional projects that are funded with CPA funds where if the community, if the project has a local preference tied to it, EOHLC might allow for a regional local preference that includes the communities that provided the funding. But unfortunately, it would not go on your SHI.
So a question about why isn't Jenny Way in the inventory? I cannot speak to that property specifically. I'm not sure if someone from the town.
Shanette and I can speak to that. Shanette, I believe Jenny Way, I think we looked into this, and a lot of the units are deed restricted at over 80% AMI, and then the ones that are restricted at 80% AMI, that at the time they were offered out, the amount of preferences on them exceeded what was allowable under EOHLC for an affirmative fair housing marketing plan. Is that correct, Shanette? It was solely local preference and Martha's Vineyard preference, so it didn't meet the fair housing standards for
Yes, that's exactly
fair housing.
what David related to us.
Mhm. So when those 80% units turn over, if they are resold, the town could at that point engage DCRHA to offer them out with under what's called an affirmative fair housing marketing plan, which is how the rest of your SHI units were offered out. And at that point, they would be eligible to go on the SHI.
Thank you, Laura. Jeff? You are on mute. Jeff, you're still on mute.
I'm
There you
sorry.
go.
Thanks, Laurel. So if I have this right, if the town through its boards were to certify the current plan that we're discussing, and we were to deliver 12 affordable units per year, the town would be in safe harbor, and as long as it continues to do the 12 units per year. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So what happens, the first step is the planning board and select board when it's approved locally and then accepted by the state. I shouldn't say approved, it has to be adopted locally. The language is very specific. But then EOHLC, when they approve it, the next step would be from that point, yes, if you produce 12 units in a year, you have a 1-year safe harbor status.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
If I might just be able to add something, Laurel, if you don't mind, and Alexis and Olivia, and hi everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm Laura Silber. I'm the Island Housing Planner for the Martha's Vineyard Commission. So delighted to have Barrett Planning here, and I'm sorry I couldn't make your first meeting. I've been really privileged to be able to support your affordable housing committee and your town boards working towards your affordable housing goals, and really delighted to be moving this housing production plan forward for you guys. I did watch the recording of the previous meeting, and I just wanted to offer some information that might help folks contextualize how much of our workforce is actually at 80% and under, including a large portion of our school district staff. I can send to the town and committee members. I got a salary schedule from the school district, and the ESPs, the education support professionals, the bulk of the administrative support professionals, custodial staff, and the younger teaching staff are all going to fall under 80% AMI. It's mostly if they're individuals or single parent families. Also, a lot of the employees in our social services across the island, including community services, IGI, Harbor Homes, all the support services that we all avail ourselves of. A lot of those employees are making 80% AMI and below, including your island housing planner. Although I do understand that I'm getting a slight raise this year. So I just want you guys to be aware that it's 40% of our workforce that makes 80% AMI and below. So when we talk about housing, when we talk about workforce housing, it's not just over 80. Like almost half of our workforce is making under 80% AMI, including the folks who are serving you. So I'm happy to answer any more questions about that, but I did hear quite a lot of questions about that in the last meeting. Julia? You're muted still.
You were talking a little fast, but I think I heard you say that the workforce who qualify for the 80% and under is mostly single people or single parents. Is that correct?
No, it includes single people and single parents, but there are also a lot of wage jobs that are with a two-income family are still going to be at 80% and under. So I did some calculations, and for a single individual making up to $35 an hour, anyone making $35 an hour or less, which is a pretty substantial wage for the vineyard, is going to clock in at 80% AMI or below. So I did check the town job listings, and there are a significant number of town jobs that are currently open that fall well below that $35 an hour in all the towns, including Edgartown. A two-person household with a single income, so that could be a single income household with two adults or a single parent, single child, making up to $40 an hour would come in at 80% AMI. And again, there are certainly many jobs, minimum wage here being $15 an hour. A lot of the special education support professionals in the school district are making, $18 to $25 an hour. The wages are a lot lower than I think a lot of us realize when we start digging into the specifics of these particular positions.
But you
So,
still haven't mentioned anything about two-earner households.
yep, two-earner households would be, wait, hang on a second. Two-earner households work the same way. So if you have a two-person household, they would be making a max of $40 combined per hour. And then for a three-person household, it was $44 per hour, a max combined total of $44 per hour would put them under 80%. So for those folks working in, cafes, working as a barista, working in food service, working in, I checked the salaries for the wastewater departments in most of the towns. There's steps in all the towns that would bring a two-person household below 80% AMI, and then there's situations where, one person's working in childcare or preschool and, they're making less. So I wasn't just looking at the town of Edgartown, I was looking across all 6 towns and in the school district and nonprofits and wage jobs as well. James?
Hey, those are valid numbers. I would argue that the more accurate are the end of year grosses. I would say the majority of those employees who are within the $20, $30, $35 an hour range are non-exempt employees, i.e. they rate overtime, they rate other type things, for example, wastewater. Yes, that's the hourly rate, but total compensation package, including benefits, just end of year W-2 gross, sometimes is an additional 20, 30%. Those jobs are designed that ways. But if Laura, you would like the gross, it's a public record. A lot of towns put it in their town report, who made what at the end of the year. Edgartown doesn't do that, but it's again a public record that could really correlate those positions with total compensation.
I'll take a look through those, James. I appreciate that. I was also looking at, there are a lot of part-time jobs where someone would maybe be working for the municipality part of the year and then maybe picking up, an hourly labor job for part of the year. And certainly I will say Edgartown's pay scale seems generous compared to, some of the other towns and nonprofits. So, but not everyone, who's working for the town is partnered with somebody who's working for the town, and not everyone's partnered. So.
David?
Yes. Do you have data on two-income households? And I guess also within that, often individuals work more than one job. It could be two, could be three, could be 1.5 or whatever. But I don't know what kind of data you have on that.
Well, that's a great question, David. We do have the census data and the ACS data, which is, the 5-year updates of the census that shows us that 40% of the island workforce that's employed, their households are making below 80% of AMI. And then there's the other factor of the cost burdening. So you're pulling down. Let me put it this way. What I'm not saying is that there's not a problem over 80% AMI, because obviously there is. We've got a problem all the way up and down the scale. But we don't not have a problem at 80% or below. That is our workforce. And I just want everyone to really understand that our workforce, a lot of our workforce is making 80% and below. So there's not a difference between capital A affordable housing and workforce housing. That is our workforce housing. So it runs the whole gamut. So it's a yes and situation and not an either or.
Thank you.
Sure.
Julia?
What qualifies someone as a 2-income household? Like if I can, this might be a silly question, but if I was not married and I rented an apartment, could I do that as myself and share it with my partner and be a single person? Because I hear what you're saying, Laura, and I employ quite a few people, and I feel like that is has been a sticking point for folks in the past, where them by themselves might be 80% AMI, but with their partner they're not.
Yeah. So, and that's why in the seasonal communities designation, we're asking for the ability we asked and were granted the ability to have a year-round housing trust that can serve a higher range of AMIs. Because that's the case. If you partner up and you're under 80% AMI, all of a sudden you're not under 80% AMI and you still can't find something. So I'm not saying it's an either or, Julia. I'm saying it's a yes and. So we've got problems at every level. I just wanted to be clear because of the conversation that I saw at the last meeting when I watched the recording, that 80% and below still does constitute a significant portion of our workforce, including public employees. It includes the sheriff's department too. I checked the wages for dispatchers and and 911 operators, and they fall into that category as well.
Probably have time for one more question, just so that we save enough time for our activity. Shanette?
Yes, Laura, I wanted you to let me know in regards to the information that you found out, was it, because I know you said 80% and lower, and I know when I look like on, DCRHA stuff, they have like 30, 60, then they have 80 and 100.
Mhm.
So the 60% and lower, like the list that you have, does it break it down the same way where it has 30%, 60%, 80%, or it just has 80 and below? Because
So I did this today because I just
Okay.
watched your recording this morning. So
Okay.
I have not had time to do a fully detailed spreadsheet with all of this. But I wanted to provide you guys with the information just to help contextualize your conversation going forward. So you had all the information that you need to consider, what your strategies are. But the new DCRHA income chart did just come out for 2025, and I can put a link to that in the chat so folks can. I think it's live on the DCRHA page now. David just sent it to me yesterday, so you can compare. But certainly, if the town can definitely do an internal study like that to break everything out, and some towns have done that. I don't think Edgartown's done that yet, or if I like grow another pair of hands and a second brain and I have time to do this, then I would be happy to do it for all the island towns. But there's unfortunately not enough of me to go around right at the moment. But I would like to do that. I think it would be really helpful for everyone.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you guys for that discussion, and thank you for those numbers, Laura. They definitely help contextualize things. So I am going to share my screen again. Can you see that? Yep. Okay, I see one nod. Okay. Alrighty. So to review what happened at the first community meeting, in case some folks weren't there, you heard all the information that we just talked about, and then we moved on to a group activity that looked like this. So we asked attendees 4 questions about housing in Edgartown and captured what they said on the tiny sticky notes shown here. I know they're small, and it's not intended that you read them right now. Just wanted to jog your memory. And I'll summarize kind of what we heard from each prompt. So first, we asked what helps you create affordable housing in Edgartown? And you all described the importance, of course, of having the land available for housing, and consequently how important and useful it is when the town makes its land available for affordable housing. Along with this is the importance of the land bank's work, as well as having a community and town that recognizes the need to address housing instability. And last, we heard that the buy down program has been successful in helping capture some of the housing that already exists as affordable units. Moving along to the right, we then asked what helps you, or excuse me, what keeps you from creating affordable housing in Edgartown. So a big constraint here is the price of land and construction costs, as well as the huge difference between incomes and thus what is affordable to Edgartown residents compared to the seasonal market, and also how some units are being lost to short-term rental. We also heard about the need to help people earning more than 80% AMI, who are still very housing stressed, as we just talked about, how eligible units are sometimes not captured on the SHI for one reason or another, and the constraints that current zoning can put on affordable housing development. We then asked what would housing at its best look like in Edgartown, and there were lots of great ideas here, most of which underscore the importance of fitting new housing in with the existing Edgartown look, which is attractive to residents and visitors alike. And people also brought up a lot of different housing types that would be available for this vision: tiny homes, employee housing, multi-family housing, mixed use or top of the shop units, especially downtown, and retaining modest housing that already exists. Excuse me. And last, we asked how you could achieve this vision of housing at its best. Some responses included figuring out a way to make ADUs a more attractive and feasible option for private homeowners, the Affordable Housing Trust purchasing deed restrictions on existing housing, utilizing short-term rental fees specifically for affordable housing, and requiring fewer special permits for the housing types that Edgartown desires. And so since the last meeting, we have used these ideas to draft goals for your HPP that prioritize your input while meeting state requirements. And so giving feedback on these draft goals and then brainstorming strategies or specific actions that can help Edgartown reach those goals will be the basis of our new activity for this meeting. But before we begin, just to briefly reiterate the state requirements for the goals, and then I'll also present the draft goals so that we all have an idea before we dive in. So the state requires an HPP to include a numerical goal for annual housing production, which is equivalent to 0.5% of total year-round units per year. And so this yearly goal is designed to help municipalities make steady progress towards the larger 10% goal while providing the opportunity to obtain temporary safe harbor status. In addition to this calculated numerical goal, an HPP must contain other goals that work towards providing a mix of housing types that are affordable, provide a range of housing for families, persons with special needs, and the elderly, and is also feasible within the housing market. So this first goal is the calculated numerical goal for annual housing production explicitly required by state guidelines. So in Edgartown's case, there are 2,440 year-round housing units on the 2020 census, and so 0.5% of that figure comes out to about 12. So Edgartown's yearly goal is to develop 12 affordable housing units and list them on the SHI. And this is the same figure that was on the previous slide and that we've been talking about. So since this goal and number is set by the state, we're not going to include it in the activity tonight, and we'll focus on these next four. So this is the first of the 4 draft goals that we'll be asking you to provide feedback on and then brainstorm strategies for. And so as it is drafted now, this goal is to increase the availability of different housing types, including rental and ownership units in a variety of sizes and affordability levels through infill, redevelopment, and thoughtful new construction. And so these goals tie directly back to the activity from the first community meeting, which you can see as the stickies on the bottom below each of the goals on these next few slides. The second draft goal is to support a diverse year-round population by helping current residents stay in the community and providing homes for older adults, employees, and families. So this is directly related to the first goal, which is more about kind of the physical structure itself, but this one is more focused on who could comfortably live in those homes. And so we're talking about diversity of economic status, age, and different types of households, so single professionals all the way up to families. The third draft goal is to address housing concerns while protecting Edgartown's natural and built environment, including natural resources, scenic landscapes, and historic small town character. And then the last goal we'll be discussing in the group activity is to improve the local and regional approach to housing through new and expanded funding sources, strategic partnerships, and creative resources to preserve and produce housing. So this is all of the draft goals, and we'll now kind of switch over from this PowerPoint to the same platform we used last time, a Mira board. And so we'll go through each goal, and first I'll ask if you feel like anything is kind of missing from it, keeping in mind that the goals work together, and so not every goal will capture, what the group will as a whole, but they should definitely be in harmony. And then we'll brainstorm strategies or those more specific actions that can help you meet that goal. And some of the ideas from last time were definitely strategies, so feel free to reiterate and kind of bring up things that you brought up last time, and we'll try to fit them into a goal. And I will stop sharing this and share my other screen. Let's see. Just bear with me for a second. Okay, hopefully that is popping up. Can you see the Mira board?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, awesome. So Olivia is going to be our scribe like last time. And yeah, so like I said, the top set of little sticky notes, colorful rectangles here is where you can give feedback on the goal itself. And then hopefully we'll kind of agree on the goal and then we'll move below it to the specific actions. So I will zoom in to the first one. Is that a good zoom level for people?
Yeah.
See that?
Yes.
Alrighty. So I can reread it and then feel free to raise your hand, jump in. Increase the availability of different housing types, including rental and ownership units, in a variety of sizes and affordability levels through infill, redevelopment, and thoughtful new construction. Does anyone have any thoughts there? Unless I just knocked it right out of the park on the first try. Maybe it'll be more useful if we go to strategies and then we can kind of come back if we feel like we're talking about something that is missing.
Yeah, Laurel, I think that's a great idea. I think that talking about the strategies may help
Okay,
people be able to reflect on the goal.
sure. And it's still up there on the screen for you, so. So it could be, where you would envision infill, where you would envision redevelopment, what different affordability levels, what the specific structures are. We've talked about tiny homes, ADUs, duplex conversion.
So as you're thinking of strategies, you can also, you can get, because we're going to fine tune the input that we receive and talk more about it internally and look at it kind of in conjunction with the needs assessment and whatnot. But you can get very, very specific with, for example, zoning or policy changes you'd like to see, or you can keep it high level if you're not, feeling as, into the weeds with the technical actions that the town might need to take. So you can get as granular or broad as you want. But a housing production plan, for it to receive that state approval, it does have to have a goal. It has to have goals relating to how the town's going to expand housing options based on identified needs. And so that's it'll be helpful to hear from those of you with experience on the ground what sorts of actions you think might help the town achieve that goal.
I think we can talk about it, you and I.
I see Chanel's hand.
I was just saying this is a question to me more directed to the planning board and the zoning, since they're the ones that really deal with all of these zoning stuff. And of course, the town administrator or as a select board member or something like that. But from the affordable housing side of it, I think after they make the decision, then the affordable housing will jump in.
Gotcha. So you're kind of looking for that direction from the planning board first. Okay.
Correct.
Are you waiting for people to raise their hands? I don't quite understand what you want at this point.
Oh, you can raise your hand, you can jump in.
All right. Well, this is Julia Livingston. I'm on the planning board and I've worked on the zoning bylaw quite a bit over the past few years. And I guess I'd be interested in hearing whether people think that the zoning is holding back development. I don't think it is. I think we have pretty generous zoning, and the planning board and the zoning board of appeals are pretty generous in interpreting it. So I'd be surprised if it's zoning that's holding back development. I think it's money that's holding back development, but not the zoning really.
Okay. Yeah, funding is part of a different goal, so we can, talk about it now, talk about it then too. Does anyone, yeah, have thoughts about zoning? I see, Laura, your hand is raised, but I'm not sure if that's from earlier or.
It was from earlier. I just was gonna suggest a couple of things that I've heard in multiple different boards as strategies that seem very implementable in Edgartown, but I don't want to, if we're talking about zoning, then I can wait on that.
One question I would have in regards to zoning would be the size of
buildable lots. Now, I know for affordable housing, there's often an exception made, but
Hi,
I do think
how are ya?
sometimes
Thank you.
the
Thank you so
size
much. Really
of
appreciate it.
the lot size, you know, whether it's 1 acre or in some areas it's 3 acre, you know, could hinder the land being affordable. And I understand that those limits are put in place to prevent overdevelopment and to maintain a rural character. But yeah, I think I guess that would fall under creating density. But yeah, I think looking at minimum lot size could help.
Sure. Yeah, and you bring up a great point of, you know, is there a specific area that or a specific zoning district that that change would be more beneficial in? So thank you for that, Catherine.
So Laurel, I'm on now. Just
Oh,
one.
hi,
point I
Judy.
Hi, just a point I would like to make. And don't shoot the messenger, but if you're going to have a housing production plan that is approved by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, it must include at least one zoning strategy that would enable the creation of affordable housing.
I've got two right out of the Affordable Homes Act if you guys want them.
As long as SHI eligible
Yep.
house. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of there are only two requirements of the seasonal communities in the Affordable Homes Act. And one of them is to unlock undersized lots for year-round housing, which could be, I know Edgartown's done some really interesting research on these very small tax lots and undersized parcels that you have. And that may be a fantastic template for looking at how to adjust zoning on these if they're used specifically for year-round housing to create home sites. The second requirement is to allow tiny homes also for year-round housing. So that would be, you know, something that would be easy enough to include in your zoning goals. That would check the box for that, you know, for the plan and also for the Affordable Homes Act for seasonal communities.
Thank you, Laura. Jeff?
Yeah, I would just like to second what Laura just said and add the fact that the recently developed Edgartown Master Plan cites both those strategies as a means to achieve more affordable housing. So I think there's a lot of support for those two particular strategies.
Thank you.
I'd
Jeanette?
like to see.
You can go ahead, Roger.
Thank you. I'd like to see some more studies, statistics that show why people would move from a market use of a particular property to provide it for subsidies, because that's a stumbling block that I can see even in places where they have high-rise apartments and extremely dense housing. It's still expensive, and the developers, people who are building them and trying to make money by building them, are always going to go to the market rather than providing a subsidized deal. So I think, as Julia said, it's much more of a money situation rather than a zoning situation. In other words, we need to some way to basically, if we're talking subsidized housing here, and to call it anything else is really avoiding the point. Like, just for example, look at this, the new bylaw that allows for an affordable alternative dwelling unit on any place where there's already a place. Well, the people are going to do that if they can make money at it. They're not going to do it unless somebody subsidizes them to provide the subsidized housing for somebody else. And I mean, I'm not talking about letting relatives and friends building a place for relative and friends. Of course, that's going to that's obviously a non-market situation. That happens even now. But I'd like to see some numbers. Show me how a community that is increasing its density is doing a better job at providing subsidized housing for for people who need it.
Thank you, Roger. Those are some great points. And yeah, I think maybe if we could add like specifically looking into ADUs and how the Affordable Homes Act allowance of by right ADUs could be incentivized as more affordable units. Shanette? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. I
No, it's
just wanted
okay.
to highlight that at the town meeting, a recent town meeting in April, that the zoning, there was an approved zoning bylaw that allowed undersized lots, like sublots, to go together where we could start building. And we actually have a project that we are looking at right now in regards to that. So that's helping affordable housing.
Is that called merger lots, Jeanette? Is that what that term is?
I'm not sure exactly what the term they use in the
Okay.
zoning bylaw. I know Julia is here. I think she worked on that one too.
It's combining undersized lots to get to the 10,000 square foot minimum that was in the bylaw to begin with. So, you know, if there are two that are 5,000 that are adjacent to each other, you can combine them now. But I will say, you know, part of the ADU, I mean, I would like to have an ADU in my property here. I could do it, and I would make it available for year-round use to somebody who's an, you know, working person. But the sewer capacity is the problem.
Well, I would add, Julia, that at 900 square feet, at a cost of $500 per square foot for building costs, we're looking at somebody making a $450,000 investment in order to have an ADU. And your point before about funding, I guess what Roger was saying as well is a really critical piece.
Can I just add to that, Michael? Because I think you and Julia raised a really important point. And I think in other states, the programs that we're seeing that are really effective, they concentrate, and there's been a lot of talk about this locally, on conversion of existing space. So attics, basements, garages, spare wings. It's exponentially less expensive to convert than it is for new construction. And the communities that have been really successful in this have put together programs that provide technical support for people who want to do this. So it takes that first hurdle of like, how do I do this, kind of out of the equation. And some communities are also providing a financial incentive, like California, a lot of the state of California, you can get a $40,000 grant in order to create an ADU. And there's a restriction that goes along with that.
You know, Laura, you bring up a point that came up a lot during the Housing Bank Initiative, which was that we couldn't build our way out of our housing problems, but we could take existing stock. It'd be very interesting to learn a little bit more about what kind of incentive programs can be offered to people to do the type of construction that you're talking about, if in fact they're making a commitment to put that into the attainable housing or affordable housing inventory. I do like the idea of being able to build over a garage or attic space, etc., because it certainly makes it a lot more financially palatable to be able to meet that need.
I think something else that I suggest that's kind of related to that and to the adaptive reuse or redevelopment piece, which I really appreciate the fact that infill and redevelopment come first in this equation and new construction is third, because I think there really are incredible opportunities here for redevelopment and for infill. And one of those is something that IHT is trying, which is creating either duplexes or triplexes that have a mix of a year-round unit and an 80% unit. And that year-round unit, which goes at a higher AMI, the price of that is subsidizing the creation of the 80% unit. And the 80% unit goes on the subsidized housing inventory. And then the year-round unit meets a really critical need in the community. And you're doing it on the footprint of what basically would be a single family home. So it fits really tidily into the built environment. And that can be done with existing inventory. It can also be done, they've done it with properties where there's a house and a guest house, and they convert that into 3 separate ownership units on the same footprint.
I really would like to ask Julia Livingston, because we've had this conversation, Julia. Is there an opportunity currently in the Edgartown zoning bylaws to do duplex or triplex, or would that require, I thought you had mentioned to me that those kind of things might require ZBA. Could there be something where that could be a zoning bylaw review to be able to change the bylaw for, multi-unit dwelling units, the way Laura's talking about it, duplex and triplex?
I guess I'm not quite understanding the question, but here's how I would rephrase. We have pretty generous rules about multi-unit buildings, but what we don't have is, let's say, designating an area of town where multi-unit buildings could be built as of right. We don't have as of right. You have to go through a permit process, and there are some criteria. For instance, your multi-unit building has to look like a single family home, to some extent. So, I mean, I'm curious to know whether this group on this call thinks that there would be an appetite in town for identifying a zone. It doesn't have to be an existing, zone necessarily, an overlay district or whatever. I don't know the technical terms, but is there an appetite for identifying a zone where multi-unit buildings, 2-family, 3-family, whatever, could be built as of right? As long as they meet, a list of criteria, obviously.
Jeff, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I would. I like the idea of it. I just would want to make sure that we'd have to carefully assess just where that area would be. And my personal preference would be that it would not be in an undeveloped part of town, that instead we would look to where it might fit in for everybody's benefit in an already developed part of town. But I think it's a great idea, and it addresses some of the open space versus density issues that come up with where do we put new housing in general. So I think it would have to be discussed, by Edgartown committee about where such a zone might be. But I think it, especially if we're thinking of 12 units a year that we would be looking to build, if we had a place where we could do that with just a few new structures or additions to existing structures, I think it's a very worthwhile strategy to pursue.
Jeff, I'm in agreement with you, because I go back to the island plan as put out by the commission in, what was that, 2009 or 2010, that it constantly referred to the idea of that, not extending the development to the more rural parts of our villages and towns, but to be concentrating on infill and integrating in where existing housing already is.
And of course, it matters what the people in that existing area have to say about it and how well this could be, done. So it speaks to a lot of town communication and very thoughtful planning, how things fit in with the overall look, and things like traffic, housing is one aspect of what we're looking at here, which includes many other aspects of wastewater and traffic, etc.
So let's scroll over to our second goal, just so that we can cover everything. And, strategies can also fit beneath multiple goals, these are of course related. But so like I said, this one's directly related to the first goal, but is kind of more about, we heard a lot about the desire to help the people who are already in the community who are struggling stay there. And so really focusing on, maybe we talked about, I know that the Deuce County Regional Housing Authority has an emergency rental relief program, things like that, that kind of help people stay in their homes. And then it's also a requirement that you kind of address older adults, family housing, just some kind of special populations with your HPP. So that is what this goal is getting at. Again, maybe we just kind of dive into the strategies. And if you have a comment about the goal itself, feel free to bring that up too. Michael?
Yeah, I want to jump real quick because one of the things that's been very exciting to me is the idea of being able to buy deed restrictions from older members of our community. The idea of being able to buy a deed sell a deed restriction, buy a deed restriction, allowing the older couple to stay in their home, or the older family to stay in their home, be able to take out some of the equity ahead of time. And at the same time, we would know that that inventory would be going into a year-round inventory market and preclude the idea that we run into regularly now of generational turnover in houses where the generation, someone, let's say, passes on, the younger people in the family decide, no, I don't want to stay. And suddenly this house goes away. It becomes a short-term rental property, becomes an investment property for somebody off island. So I think it's a wonderful sword, double-edged. Sword's probably not the right word. It's a wonderful tool to be able to say to older people struggling to stay in their home, here, let us buy a deed restriction on your home, give them a major influx of cash, and at the same time, we would know that that house would be available for affordable housing moving forward.
Thank you, Michael. It's a great idea.
I would like to add Lease to Locals program, which has been so successful in Nantucket. I just checked their numbers and I cannot believe how many uninhabited and short-term rentals they have converted into year-round rentals in just the space of 1 year. And it's a minimum investment and it's so fast. It's this incredibly successful tool to use while you're creating permanent inventory, and it works with the existing inventory on the ground. And then related to that, I was wondering if Alexis is still on, if she could say something about the Ready Renters program, which seems to be working really well in Falmouth and also uses the existing built environment and gets ADUs onto the subsidized housing inventory.
So
I was
I can
curious about
address
that.
that, Laura, because
Okay, thanks, Judy.
That's not a problem. Alexis shifted over to the other meeting. So Ready Renter is a system that is available to some of the communities, participating communities in Barnstable County, where essentially one of the towns is handling a process for finding renters for available affordable rental units in a manner that will make sure the unit is filled in a fair and open basis, i.e. complies with fair housing. And it has been pretty successful. I think if Alexis were here, she would tell you it is very labor intensive. It was hard to set up. They went through a couple of iterations of it on the Cape before they finally landed at where it is now, which is that the town of Yarmouth is kind of acting as the lead for 7 or 8 communities that are participating. But it is very labor intensive. It's a lot of work to set it up. I think once it's going, it's just a question of making sure there's a dedicated staff person to manage it. But it is a way to fill designated affordable units, and I'm using the word affordable to mean Chapter 40B eligible, affordable units, and to make sure that they stay on the subsidized housing inventory so they don't run into a fair housing problem down the road. So it is it's a resource that's available. You just have to have communities that are interested in doing it, and you've got to have the staff capacity and know how to set it up and maintain it.
Thanks, Judy. So if it's multiple communities, basically what it is the town footing the bill for the affirmative fair housing marketing plan for these potentially individual units, which is one of the reasons why individually restricted 80% AMI units generally don't show up on the subsidized housing inventory because it's not practical for homeowners to run an affirmative fair housing marketing plan financially. So it's like the town or the region or the county creating that program. So it has the potential to be like a partnership or a regional program that could solve a lot of problems in a lot of the towns.
Well, can I just ask? I see that they have these catchy names for these programs, but I'm trying to understand what the program actually is. I mean, first of all, you have to have the tenant selected by a lottery, not by the owner. But also you have to somehow cover the difference between the money the owner can make from short-term rental on the one hand and the money they're going to collect from the tenant, right? Because people are not going to voluntarily turn their cash cow short-term rental into a workforce housing.
So Julia, there are different strategies to deal with different issues. The Ready Renter program is really about, I have a unit that was put on the subsidized housing inventory because it met those requirements. I want to keep it there. In order for me to keep it there, I have to ensure that as the unit turns over, it's going to be available to another income eligible person on a fair and open basis. So you're starting with a unit that is already on the subsidized housing inventory. The original unit must go through a lottery. Once it's vacant and available for second and third occupancy, the Ready Renter program runs a periodic lottery to keep the list fresh. But the point is that landlords aren't then scrambling to find someone who's income eligible and meets all the other program requirements. There's a program that's helping them do that.
Okay, but that doesn't seem like a big problem here, honestly. The problem is getting the unit onto into the income level in the first place.
Well, I don't know. Laura brought it up. I wanted to address how it works, but I would say, it's not as easy to keep a unit on the subsidized housing inventory as you might think. We lose them. So this is what communities on the Cape did to try to protect that inventory.
I think it's worth saying investigate a regional Ready Renters program because Julie, I think you'd be surprised even at Edgartown's inventory at how many units there are at 80% that are actually not eligible for the subsidized housing inventory because they are not being offered out under an affirmative fair housing marketing plan because they're like a single unit.
Right.
Because it's not feasible to do that as a single unit. West Tisbury, half of their inventory, they have the amount of inventory that's showing on the SHI, they have the same number of units that are at 80% that don't show on the SHI because they haven't been offered out under an affirmative fair housing marketing plan.
Right.
So it's a substantial inventory across the island.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm not saying that it's a bad idea. I'm just saying that getting it going takes effort. And that at some point there has to be an initial lottery to fill that unit.
Understood. And then Julie, to speak to your question about lease to locals, it's a subsidy that's paid to the owner of the short-term rental or the empty unit to convert it into a year-round unit. And that's something that I know the Affordable Housing Committee here has been researching. Chilmark just signed a contract with Lease to Locals to get a pilot program going. And Nantucket's doing it, Provincetown and Wellfleet, Truro, and Orleans are about to launch programs. So,
right.
Yes, what I'm asking is, it's a monthly amount to sort of cover the difference. How does the subsidy work, and where does the money come from?
The homeowner can receive, this is Lease to Locals on Nantucket. The homeowner can receive up to $27,000 for converting their converting their property into year-round rentals. So here in their program, this is the Nantucket one. Eligibility was tenants must earn at or below 175 of AMI. homeowners receive up to $27,000 for converting their properties into year-round rentals. Leases must be for a minimum of 12 months. Returning homeowners are eligible for up to 50% of the first year incentive amount.
So I don't think we need to vet the program at this meeting, but I just wanted to raise it as something that I know that the town's been talking about. It's working in other towns, and perhaps it's an opportunity to go here. If you want to take it down, you can, but I don't want to take up any more time like vetting a program. It's pretty complicated, and that can be done outside of this meeting.
It is a great idea, though.
And I do like it, again, thinking back to again where we started with Ms. Mears' comment. We're setting a target of 12 units in order to get ourselves to safe harbor. Safe harbor is unique from the idea of trying to deal overall with what we want to try to accomplish with what we need for housing for our workforce. But I really like this as an idea to be able to meet some of those 12 units.
You, Michael. I'm going to go to Shanette.
Yes, I just wanted to let everyone know that the Affordable Housing Committee did do research on the lease to local. They were looking into that because we had a program called the Edgartown Housing Heroes, and we thought this would fit perfectly with it. The cost was the committee members didn't agree with the cost of it. It was like probably 30 or 40% was the administrative fees. They thought it was too much. And then when we did some further research, we found out that Dukes County Regional basically could do the same thing. This is something that the committee is still looking into. They plan to follow up more in depth with this in the fall, but it's something that is on the table, just so everyone knows about that.
Thank you, Shannon. The Housing Heroes program. Okay.
Yep.
They do all have catchy names. You're right.
Yep.
Okay. I want to just make sure we get to everything and then we can return, but I want to keep the train moving slightly and jump to the third goal, which is to address all of these concerns while protecting Edgartown's natural and built environment, including natural resources, scenic landscapes, and historic small town character. So in my mind, the infrastructure issues of sewer and wastewater would all kind of fall under here. The design standards, which I understand might be addressed in the master plan. I'm not sure if anyone is involved in that effort, but yeah, so anything about the natural and built environment.
I have a request because
Yes.
the pond associations are now, like, I'm so delighted, aggressively pursuing the approval of urine diversion programs at state level, which would take 80% of the nitrogen and 50% of the phosphorus and divert it so it never hits the ground. So if you guys would be willing to support that by putting in a strategy that would say, pursue recognition at state level for nitrogen credits for urine diversion programs and composting toilets, because it requires DEP approval.
I would agree with that from Laura. It might raise a couple of chuckles, but I think it is something that is very meaningful in terms of reducing the nitrogen going into the ponds, for sure.
Nitrogen reducing strategies, including urine diversion. If you wouldn't mind, please, using that term, it would help the pond associations move this forward at state level.
And composting toilets fall into this category?
They do, because composting toilets they're allowed, but you don't get the level of nitrogen credits that they should be getting for the amount of reduction that they provide. So they're not being used as widely as they could be, and they're a really powerful tool.
Yeah, they're They're totally amazing.
Right. So part of that is getting DEP to recognize the level of mitigation and provide those nitrogen credits, which will encourage people to put them into higher use. And also encourage the state to, do what they've done with other tools and make it more available through tech support, which would be enormous.
Through technical support, was that the last part?
Well, the state, I'm just saying, like, if enough requests from the towns will spur the state not just to recognize it and approve it. There are pilots that are going to happen, but once they're approved, when the state sees that they're a powerful enough tool, they can create technical support programs to
Okay.
help on the implementation end.
Thank you.
I'm going to
Yeah.
say maybe this will be unpopular or unuseful. I don't know. But I think it might be great if a couple of architectural firms that work down here would put together, model plans for, let's say, a 3-unit building that looks like a single family house. I know it can be done. And I hate seeing these duplexes that are being put up on this island that are just not attractive to me at all. They just look like kind of shoeboxes, townhouse kind of yuck. I think it would be really great if some really good architects, I know we have them, put together, some models showing how, a 3-unit building or a 4-unit could really look like a nice Edgartown single family house.
Jeff?
Well, here I am agreeing again, but I love that idea. And I think with a little publicity, there are people in town or on the island or connected to the island who would be intrigued by just the challenge that Julia's mentioned. And I agree. We're seeing a lot of these box style housing going in, and it can be done better. And if we're going to develop, we should do it better. So, seconding Julia's strategy.
I would add not only the duplex, triplex, but ask those same architects to compete to be able to create really creative designs for tiny houses.
Roger?
Yes, I'd like to just harp back on the issue of the money again. If everybody agrees that the issue is what we're going to do is subsidize housing for people who can't afford it, we have to realize that what we're paying for is we want to pay money to protect the built environment, the natural resources, the scenic landscapes, historic and small town character. It's going to cost something to protect these things, but that's the whole point. That's the whole point of this thing. That, just for example, right now Edgartown has either the lowest or second lowest tax rate in the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now, if we're interested in saving all these things and subsidizing for housing, we should put up the money and buy the property where housing belongs, where it's close to the sewer, etc., and put it there. We shouldn't be trying to skimp and destroy the natural environment, the things that attract people here to come and pay the expensive money for the houses and pay the high taxes. But once again, trying to get by somehow, we're going to the whole business of the 40B thing is exactly what this is. So we're gonna allow these huge subdivisions with all this overbuilt dense housing because we're going to get some housing out of it, and somehow we're going to avoid paying for it. Well, I think the town of Edgartown is making enough money and paying a low enough tax rate. It should pay for for what we want. And if we want to save the environment and have the scenic things, let's come up with the money for the housing where we really want it to be. That's my point.
Thank you, Roger. Jeff, I saw your hand, but I don't know if it timed out or
Yeah.
you took.
I just wanted to agree once again, real quickly, with Roger's last point. The town has the resources to do the types of things we're talking about, and it might mean that the town has to pay more in order to promote our goals. But I do think that using town resources and expanding them as necessary in order to achieve our housing goals is a very sound point, and one that I think is a good strategy.
And David, I'll let you go, but that's a great segue to our last goal, which talks about new and expanded funding.
Oh, well, I'm going right into expanded funding.
Okay, then let's scroll over. Perfect.
And
go right ahead.
There are property tax strategies that are being used throughout the Commonwealth that either can increase our tax revenue or keep it neutral by making shifts in tax rates for, I'll say, very high end housing versus lower median housing. And I know Nantucket has some of those, using some of those strategies. Mashpee has a year-round residence strategy. And I'm not that familiar with the specifics of that, but my point is that there are existing strategies out there that we should be looking at and making some hard decision, or maybe they're easy decisions as to what would enable us to generate the additional cash to meet our goals.
David, are you talking about like a residential tax exemption, like West Tisbury just adopted?
I'm not sure what West Tisbury did, but it's
one of the strategies
what I saw in Mashpee was the year-round residents, and you'd have to prove that you were a year-round resident by saying that you brought your tax. You'd have to show that your residence for federal tax purposes was the town of Edgartown, and you got a reduction versus some other non-residents was one of the strategies that I've seen.
Yep, that's called a residential tax exemption.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess if I could just say one other thing, there's just so many good ideas that exist. I've always been a believer when I did strategic planning, if you could just grab, all the inventory, all those great ideas, and I know what we're sort of doing here, but somehow to inventory those maybe beyond the state of Massachusetts to maybe looking at other areas like Martha's Vineyard and Edgartown, I don't want to call them resort because we don't want to be a resort community. But communities like ours, what are they doing? And I don't know. I know I've not done any research to look at that, but and perhaps others are very familiar with that, but it just seems that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's probably a lot of good ideas. Of course, they're difficult. They may be difficult to implement and to modify to be the right fit for us. But that's one of the things that comes to mind for me.
Thank you, David. I'm going to go to James.
Gonna my hand. I was gonna say a wise person once said that if it can be solved by money, it's not a problem. Affordable housing is a problem. Edgartown had 14 million in free cash this past year. We have $1 million right now, close to the Affordable Housing Trust. Now, yeah, you can throw millions of dollars at this, but unless zoning changes, unless other factors change, I totally understand David's. The residential tax exemption. I mean, we're one of the only towns in the island that doesn't do that. There's a interesting article in the Cape Cod Times about Eastham, who was trying to implement it and kind of the pushback that happened. I think Edgartown didn't implement that for a variety of reasons, but ultimately it's not a cash flow issue in Edgartown. If there's a solid tangent plan that has thought behind it and the due diligence, there's never not been an affordable housing idea or program that has gone to town meeting and hasn't been funded. So I'd be very hesitant to put down solutions that are immediate, just more money at it, because the town has the money and the town has ample money. I mean, $14 million free cash for a town of our size is too much. That we should lower the tax rate. But the financial process has been, we're going to get hit with a school that's going to cost $300-400 million. And then that's when the tax rate should be lowered to try to compensate, so it's not such a huge jump. Likewise, wastewater, Council on Aging, Chappie Ferry, all of those potential future capital projects.
Laura, were you going to respond to that?
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on what James is saying about all those upcoming capital projects. And I do think that including the transfer fee on the funding strategies would be great, because that is an unfettered revenue source. So unlike CPC or some other funds that are tied to AMI, that's an unfettered revenue stream that the state is contemplating would only be used for affordable housing, or not affordable and attainable housing, which would free up all the other revenue streams in the town to be used for these infrastructure projects. So it wouldn't be competing with, other infrastructure needs.
Laura,
And I think there's
talking about the housing bank, right?
the transfer fee. Yeah, as the towns voted it as a housing bank.
Bank, right?
Yep.
Yep.
What's that?
Most of us call it the housing bank.
Yep, I call it the housing bank / transfer fee.
Okay.
Because
Good.
the funding stream itself is a transfer fee, and articulating that in the housing production plan is a really important thing to have articulated, because the state's going to read this and we want them to see that.
Yes, we want the housing bank. Transfer, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Jenny asks what's the status of the transfer fee. The bills have all been refiled this legislative session, which just started January 1st. And with the seasonal communities designation, we actually have a potentially new path forward for the seasonal communities, which would be 5 of the 6 towns here so far, although we anticipate that Aquin is going to adopt next month, Nantucket, the Lower Cape towns, and several of the towns in the Southern Berkshires. So it's in process, and we're very lucky that Senator Sear, our own senator, who's a huge champion of the transfer fee, happens to be the chair of the Housing Committee this session. So fingers crossed.
Julia.
No, I was crossing my fingers.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So I do want to hit other parts of this goal besides just, the funding topic. So anything
I would ask that this is from a conversation with James about clearing title to some town-owned parcels, request tech support from the state for clearing title to town-owned parcels. James, if that aligns with your goals.
No, Laura, I think it does. I mean, the town has a lot of tax title properties, and we have to get a tax title attorney to come in, and that kind of goes through. It's financial, but it's time wise, and ultimate legislative side has to release that. But I think there's a lot of opportunity in some of those tax title lots that are located throughout the town. It's just the power and staffing and expertise to get to the point of where they are in title and clearing title.
I think that's the strategic partnership piece is, state partners, I think state technical assistance, Laurel, I think was what I was trying to say, because that sort of falls under the strategic partnership.
Okay. Great. Anything else maybe about investing in the right land for housing clusters? For example, the wrecked car lot on Chappie could be made healthy space for sewage handling, a cluster of multiple houses with the Chappie store, a little Chappie center. Thank you, Jenny. Julia? I saw your hand and then
Oh, is there a way to work with employers for employee housing? So I don't know. I mean, it seems like everything has to go out to a lottery. So if you've built employee housing for your employees, it can't qualify for any of this, but I know that that exists and is in process for a lot of people.
right. So depending, it might not count on the SHI, but that is an important housing need, so should definitely be part of this. Thank you.
I would suggest work with the business community to explore dedicated seasonal employee housing, which would take pressure off of the year-round housing stock. That's something that the town of Nantucket is actually developing right now, and Provincetown just greenlighted a project also.
Anything, any last thoughts?
I'd like to, sorry, also suggest something that came out of the Affordable Housing Committee. I know they were talking with Nantucket about investigating, where is it? Oh, the demolition delay bylaw, and how the demolition delay bylaw can be beefed up to intersect with a structure relocation program that's been hugely successful on Nantucket. And I know that the Affordable Housing Committee started that conversation with Nantucket. So I think further investigation would be merited.
Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We've got about 3 minutes left. Any final thoughts? And then I just have a last slide to show you all. Hearing none. Just go back here.
I see Jeff's hand. Jeff, I think you can just call out
sorry.
at this point.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. Laurel, if I could add, I don't know exactly where it fits as a strategy, but I would like to see the town working with other agencies, including the Steamship Authority, to improve our commuter infrastructure that would take pressure off the need to create more housing. And this would entail fast ferries and the like that would be reliable and safe and would deliver key workers here the same way commuters go into urban areas and sit in traffic perhaps. And it could be done, I think, well here. The current infrastructure does not support that, but long term, as we're looking at, we can't house everybody, but we can achieve some of our goals by doing things such as these kinds of commuter infrastructure improvements. So I don't know exactly where that fits, but I just wanted to add that. And the last thing would be that we begin, as I brought up in the first meeting, the dialogue about limiting the number of building permits issued to seasonal housing so that we can more readily catch up at the other end of the housing market. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, we will definitely collect those and add them. And also the good stuff that's been sending in the chat, we might have not included that on sticky notes yet, but I'll go back through and kind of add them in. Okay, can you see the presentation again? Yes, okay, great. So I know I was calling them final thoughts, just final thoughts for tonight, but please feel free to email me. My email, maybe Olivia could send it in the chat. It's just laurel@barrettplanningllc.com. But I wanted to share about 2 online engagement opportunities that we would love you to take a look at after the meeting and share with your friends, family, neighbors. So the first is a housing ideas map, which is essentially you can drop a pin anywhere in Edgartown and tell us about your housing ideas for that area. So that should be live on our project page. And then the second is a vision statement, kind of Mad Lib, if you remember Mad Libs, where you can kind of fill in the blanks and create a statement about your vision for housing in Edgartown. And so this vision should be unifying. It's in the beginning of a plan, and then it's kind of the vision statement. Goals are nestled beneath those, and then strategies beneath that. So that's kind of the hierarchy. And so it's formatted like someone from the future is kind of looking at all the progress we've made and reporting what it looks like and what you did to reach that future and why you were motivated to get there. So please fill those out and share them with folks because we would like to hear about that. And then that brings us to the end. You can reach our project page either through the chat or by scanning this QR code here. It's where we post information about upcoming meetings and, like I said, the map and vision. A recording of this meeting as well as the slides will be posted there. And then the last public meeting will be on June 5th at 5:30, also on Zoom, and we'll be getting feedback from you about the draft plan and then incorporating those comments before this project wraps up at the end of that month. So thank you again so much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at the next community meeting and maybe talking to you before then.
I would like to say thanks to the town of Edgartown for everybody showing up and coming up with such amazing ideas, and a huge thank you to the Barrett planning team for leading this really productive discussion. So
Sure,
thank you,
yeah.
everybody.
Good job, Laurel. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.